Just before my husband Roy died, he went on a grueling tour of hope in an effort to raise money for a specialist lung cancer centre in Liverpool. Most people told him he should never have gone, but he was a real fighter and was determined to do it. The other day I was watching some film footage of his travels. There's one part where Roy is being helped from a train. The platform is crowded with well-wishers, and somebody put a microphone in front of him and asked him if he was worried about dying. He replied, "No, I don't think I'll be afraid to say, 'Hello, God.'" And then he said, "And I think my children will think well of me." He cared deeply about his family. He loved his work, but he loved his family more. And that's why he loved Rob's books on family life. Together, we brought up 4 children. We had some sympathy with the man who said, "When I got married, I had 4 theories on child rearing and no children. Now I have 4 children and no theories." I think one of the most brilliant titles I've ever seen on a book on parenting was called "Parenting Isn't for Cowards," and I really believe that's true. We want to do the very best for our children, but so often it seems such an uphill struggle. Well, here is Rob doing what he does best, making us laugh, cry, telling us we're not alone, and giving us principles that can strengthen us in our role as parents. Roy died just before the book on which this seminar is based came out, but I know he would have loved it, and so will you.
Bring someone into the world, rearing them, bring them up and everything, it's what you're here for.
I'm expecting my first baby in about 8 weeks' time.
It's not what I expected it to be. When you first decide you're going to have children, you think of these lovely little babies, but they grow up very quickly.
And they can be little toads at times.
Happy days with them, I wouldn't be without them for the world, would I? I miss them. Yes.
I would like to be a father one day. Yeah, I would like to be a father one day. Doesn't interest me at all.
Parenthood's lovely.
I've always been a home mum and enjoyed every minute of it.
I wouldn't swap them. Generally, sometimes you wish you would.
Welcome to the 60-Minute Parent. My name is Jonathan Booth and I'm the Director of Care for the Family, the charity that Rob founded, which is dedicating to strengthen marriages and family life. We're involved in giving counsel, answering hundreds of letters, caring for families and for people as individuals, and bringing seminars and resources like this video that you're about to watch to be of help to our families. Rob Parsons is our speaker today. He is a qualified teacher and lawyer and the best-selling author of The 60-Minute Father. Over 100,000 people have attended seminars like this one on family life. He has spoken in Moscow, throughout Europe, in the USA, and in Canada. His books sell from Warsaw to Washington. Sir John Harvey Jones said of The 60-Minute Father that it will help us achieve the greatest success of all. So let's begin. Would you join me in welcoming Rob Parsons?
Thank you for that welcome. It's great to be with you today. When I wrote the book, The 60-Minute Father, I wrote that out of many failures I felt I'd made when my own children were small. Senior partner in quite a large law practice involved in many agendas outside the office, but it dawned on me one day my own family was slipping through my fingers. And I was constantly meeting people who'd reached the very top of their profession, and yet they were looking back on the lost years of childhood with incredible regret. And I wrote that book for fathers because it was very much my own experience, but the ink hadn't been dry on the page for 5 minutes, but I began getting hundreds of letters from women who said this is really a book about parenting, not just fatherhood. So when we decided to film the heart of that little book, we decided to call it The 60-Minute Parent. So mom or dad, single parent, mom or dad, grandparent, grandmum, you're welcome tonight. And I hope as we share the heart of the 60-minute parent, it will help you be more effective in that most incredibly important job. You know, Dan and I have been married over 25 years. We have 2 children. Lloyd's 16, Katie's 19. And I think sometimes, because we write books on family life and run seminars, people think our home is a haven of serenity. We worry about our children. They're doing fine at the moment, but we worry about them. We're concerned about them. Folks, who gets us ready for parenting? You know, Colin Bowles wrote some wonderful tests that he said you should take before you think of having children. He wrote 10 of them, but let me give you a few. Women, to prepare for maternity, put on a dressing gown and stick a beanbag down the front. Leave it there for 9 months. After 9 months, take out 10% of the beans. Men, to prepare for paternity, go to the local pharmacist, tip the contents of your wallet on the counter, tell him to help himself. Then go to the supermarket, arrange to have your salary paid direct to their head office. Pick up the newspaper, read it for the last time. Can you stand the mess that children make? Well, to find out, first smear peanut butter onto the sofa and jam onto the curtains. Hide a fish finger behind the stereo and leave it there all summer. Stick your fingers in the flower beds, rub them on the clean walls, cover the stains with crayons. How does that look? Dressing children is not easy. To find out if you can really do it, first buy an octopus and a string bag. Attempt to put the octopus into the string bag so none of the arms hang out. Time allowed for this all morning. Are you ready to take children shopping? Well, to find out, go to your local supermarket. Take with you the nearest thing you can to a preschool child. A fully grown goat is excellent. If you intend to have more than one child, take more than one goat. Buy the week's groceries without letting the goat out of your sight. Pay for everything the goats eat or destroy. Until you can easily accomplish this, don't even contemplate having children. Somebody once said, insanity is hereditary. You get it from your kids. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, the problem about parenting is just about the time we get experienced, we're redundant. So here are my 10 goals that I think can help any parent in that task, whether you have toddlers or teens, or to some extent, even if your children are grown and flown the nest. Here are my 10. There could be 110, and your 10 may be different, but for what they're worth, here are mine. Number 1, give them time. I've told you I'm a lawyer, and Vince Foster was a lawyer too. Except Foster was one of the most prestigious lawyers in the whole of the world. He was President Clinton's lawyer. 6 weeks before he died, he addressed the graduating class of Arkansas Law School, where he himself had been a student. Imagine a crowded lecture theater. Imagine these young men and women at the very beginning of their legal careers, anxious to hear from this man they so wanted to emulate. Listen to some of what Foster said to them that day. A word about family. You've amply demonstrated you are achievers, willing to work hard, long hours, and set aside your personal life. But try to balance wisely your professional and your family life. Your parents will warn you, if you have children, they will be grown and gone before you know it. He said, I am reminded of the observation nobody was ever heard to say on their deathbed, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. The office can wait. It will still be there after your children are gone. You see, this is a window of opportunity. How wide is that window? Well, let's imagine we have the 18 years of our children's lives. I remember doing a little math. I worked out that those years contained 6,570 days. There's hardly a parent on the face of the earth who would miss those days if they went by in one shot, but they don't. They go by a day at a time. Every one of those days is a chance to teach them to fly a kite, or teach them to say their prayers, or pass on some value that matters to us. But they do slip by a day at a time. Robert Herrick, the poet, put it like this: gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying. But that same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. It's the carpe diem phrase, seize the day. And that principle is never more true than in the childhood years. Just then the door of childhood is wide open. They want to spend time with us. You know, incredibly often, they don't even want us to do things with them. They just want us to be there. And I shared with you when I began, I've learned many of these lessons through failure. I think 3 illusions allowed me to go on living an over-busy lifestyle that robbed my young children of time far longer than it should have done. Illusion number 1, I'm doing this for them. I want them to have the best. James Dobson said this: today in society, we are so busy giving our children what we didn't have, we don't have time to give them what we did have. Illusion number 2, a slower day is coming. Life won't always be this busy. When we've opened another office, when we've decorated the house, when I've got another partner, when I've got promotion, life is going to be slower. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an illusion. Most of us create busyness from within. The slower day is not coming. If you have anything at all, whether you are single, married, have children, or don't, anything in life that really matters to you, if you can, do it now. And illusion number 3 was that door of childhood would be open forever. That when I said to them, hey, we'll do it later, that there always would be a later. Now, I am so grateful I learned some of these lessons while my children were young enough for me to do something about it. Because you know that door of childhood closes so fast and so finally. When Lloyd was a little boy, I used to sing him a lullaby. He'd let me croak it out because it extended bedtime. And it was of 2 lovers, and one lived over the sea, and one would stand on a cliff and say, if only I could spread out my white wings, I'd fly home to you. And I'd put my finger down on his nose as his head lay on the pillow, and he'd reach up and put his finger on my nose. Fly home to you. We did that night after night, month after month, down the years. Until one night, as I began to croak, he said, don't. And I said, why? He said, because it's babyish. You know what that little boy was saying? Saying something like this: Dad, I love you and we got some great times ahead. But I am just serving notice on you now that that particular door of childhood is closed. And you know, when that door closes, no power on earth can open it again. And one day it dawned on me, unless I changed, pretty soon I was going to say to these kids, hey, do you fancy doing something this weekend? And they'd say, Dad, could we do it next weekend? Would that be okay? Sometimes parents say to me, but if I want a job, I have to be away from home a lot. I said to one father recently, how'd you manage? If you're going to earn money, you have to be on the road 60, 70 hours a week. Never forget what he said. He said, I let my children know in 1,000 ways I'd rather be with them. And he said, when I am with them, I let nothing rob me of that special time. You know, I remember sometimes I'd be reading Katie a bedtime story and the phone would ring. She'd say, Dad, please don't take it. I'd say, Kate, I'll be back in a moment. I'd take those stairs 5 at a time. And I'd make that call, then make another call, and then suddenly I'd remember I'd not got the frog back into a prince. And I'd rush back upstairs, but little eyes had fought for as long as they could. It's best not to get too emotional about that, but to understand how fast those years go. The truth is, whatever age our children are, they need us. There's many a parent found a relationship with their children when they were grown they never knew when they were small. But when they are small, it is a special opportunity. Think again of those 6,570 days. If your daughter is 10 years old, you have 2,920 left. Insofar as is possible, in the busy lives we all live, believe Vince Foster was right. Try not to miss one of them. Goal number 2, give love without strings. Hey, come with me for a moment back to the school playground. You're about 8 years old, you have an unforgettable haircut, And suddenly, the teacher asks 2 children to be captains and to pick teams. Do any of you remember how you felt when that happened? Some of you even now can feel that old feeling in your stomach, can't you? Because you were scared you would be picked last. How did those captains pick teams? They wanted winners. They wanted the cleverest children to win the quizzes, the best football players, the best hockey players. They wanted the best children on their teams. They wanted winners. And you know, many of us as adults have never left that playground. We find the world still loves us when we succeed, when we hit our targets, when we pass our exams, sometimes even those in our own family. But a mother's love and a father's love should be different. There is no power on the face of the earth that will bind your child to you than the belief that even if his brother is better at sport, more academic than he is, that you love him anyway. The power of unconditional love. I remember when my daughter was about 8 years old. She's studying law now in university, but when she was small, I remember she came running home from school one day. Daddy, I got 95% in maths. I had 2 questions. Katie, what happened to the 5%? And where were you in the class order? I'm ashamed of that now. I learned a few lessons by the time Lloyd got older. I remember he came home one day and said, Dad, I got an A in maths. That's pretty good for Lloyd. He probably bribed the teacher. But I said something to him I learned from Josh McDowell. Son, I am proud of you. But I want to take this moment to tell you something you must never, ever forget. It is a life principle between you and I. I don't love you anymore because you got an A. Son, you may break my heart, but you'll never stop me loving you. The power of unconditional love is awesome. You know, I was at a seminar some time ago, and a single-parent mum came up to me at the back. She said, Rob, thanks for what you've shared. It's really encouraged me. Can I tell you about my son? He's 23 years old, and he's a punk rocker. In fact, she says he has the most outrageous punk hairstyle in our city. His head is completely shaved, apart from 5 inches in the middle, which stands up like a cockatoo's tail, and is bright pink. She says he has a ring to his eyebrow, his nose, and either cheek. He wears black leather clothes and a little eye mascara. She said the other day I was in the supermarket with him. He said, Mom, I'm going to buy some cigarettes, and then I'll come back and help you pack. She said the second he was gone, the woman at the checkout turned to her and said, how can you bear to be seen out with him when he looks like that? She said, I smiled at her and said, oh, my dear, it's very easy. You see, I brought him up all these years. I love him. He's my son. You know, I was at a seminar recently, and I just told that story, and a businessman came up to me. I suppose he'd be mid-40s. He said, you know, when I was in my early 20s, I was a punk rocker too. In fact, I was an outrageous punk rocker, worse than the one you mentioned. And he said, the only person who'd walk down the street with me was my old grandmother, who was 90 years old. Isn't that wonderful? This old lady with silver hair and little glasses hanging on to this punk rocker. The power of unconditional love is awesome. You know, a friend of mine was recently at a school prize giving. It was an unusual prize giving. Oh, the prizes weren't unusual, and the principal read out the rewards in a time-honored way. And it was strange because the achievements weren't that great. In fact, there wasn't a child in any school in the country who couldn't have performed any one of them. And yet it was very unusual. The headmaster read out the achievements these young people had done. To Susan, a prize because she has learned to blow her nose. To Peter, because he can clean his teeth and has read a poem. To Simon, because he has made a lovely painting. We've put it on the wall, but it wasn't very wonderful, that painting. This was a school for severely disabled children. And as these young people walked down the aisle, and some of them struggled down the aisle, and a couple of them danced down the aisle, there was hardly a dry eye in the place. And at the back, their mothers and fathers clapped and cheered and yelled. Would those parents have preferred to have seen their children breaking the tape at a school sports? Oh, yes, they would. Would they prefer to be at a university where their children get accolades for a first in classics? Oh, yes, probably. But these mothers and fathers had learned to love, not just because of, but in spite of. They had learned to love unconditionally. They had learned to see wonderful things in those children's lives that you can't measure in grades or achievement. They had learned the power of unconditional love. It is the greatest force on the face of the earth. Goal number 3, to praise my children. Catch your children doing something right. Any of you have teenagers? Stick your hand if you've got a teenager. Oh, gosh. Now, do any of them have untidy bedrooms? Oh. Hey, it was almost worth coming tonight to find you're not the only one. A woman came up to me recently. She said, I daren't go in my son's bedroom lest I have a tetanus injection. She said, I've seen cockroaches coming out that bedroom with suitcases, saying I can't live in there any longer. Now, most of us have tried to deal with a bedroom like that sometime in our parental career, haven't we? And normally we have employed the age-old management technique of yelling. And there have been some small victories, but pretty well it hasn't changed a thing. See, most of us discipline our children by catching them doing something wrong and criticize them for it. But we discovered in the business world years ago, the faster way is to find people doing something correctly and praise them for it. Dad told me recently how he'd been trying to get his son of about 10 or 11 to eat properly with a knife and fork. He said this boy normally comes to the table as though he's on the set of The Last of the Mohicans. See, the other day I'm in a restaurant with him and he looks as if he's about to stab somebody. I'm about to criticize him. I bite my tongue. And then he said by accident, he said it must have been by accident because he tried every other way. Suddenly, he's got them correctly. He said, I leaned forward, I squeezed his arm. I said, son, you've got it, haven't you? You're growing up. He said it was fascinating. For the next 30 minutes, watching that little boy try and keep them in the same position. Because when somebody praises us, we want them to praise us again. It says what you're doing is right. Catch your children doing something right. It can be small things. Susan, when you made our guest a cup of coffee, that was a good thing to do. You know, Simon, when you gave some of your allowance to that homeless person, I was so proud of you. Charlie, when you didn't lose your cool with that umpire, that was a good thing to do. It was a bad decision, but you did well. You catch them doing something right. You say, well, that's all very well, but tell me something positive I can say about that bedroom. Well, it's not easy. But how about this? Well, son, that ceiling certainly is tidy. Goal number 4, to laugh more with my children. You know, life is serious, isn't it? In my work, I see lots of pain, broken families, broken lives. Life is serious. There are bills to pay, there's healthy eating to see to, there are values to pass on. All that is true. But childhood needs to remember moments like that and times of helpless laughter. My wife Diane said to me some years ago, Rob, we don't laugh together as much as we used to as a family. And she said, I'm missing it. I heard a dad say, he said, when I am old, I want my children to look back and say, well, he taught me to care for the weak. He passed on values to me. But he said, I think I'd missed it if they didn't also add, you know, the old boy was fun to be with. You know, when my children were very small, they used to love having what they called a family night. They would drag their mattresses into our bedroom and sleep on our bedroom floor. And then once in a while, we'd have what we call a super family night. We'd all drag our mattresses downstairs and sleep on the lounge floor together. Now, there's no logical reason why 4 people with perfectly good beds upstairs should want to do that, except it's fun. And the lights would be out and the fire would be on and we'd watch a video or listen to story tapes and eat chocolate. Now, I've been speaking in public long enough to be able to smell trouble at 100 yards. And this woman was trouble as she came at me down the aisle. She said to me, how dare you? How dare you encourage them to get their children to eat chocolate? Their teeth will rot. See, that's a killjoy in action. They smell a little fun and they swoop. But children love those who will laugh with them. You know, just now in our home, I've been trying to get my children to save electricity, trying to get Diane to save electricity. I have put those stickers by the switches that say save the planet, but it's to no avail. But I have found a way which will make it worth your while being here today, even if the rest of the evening is boring for you. I put a list in the kitchen with every family member's name on it. When you turn off a switch that somebody else turned on but forgot to turn off, you get a point. At the end of the week, the person with most points gets a bonus of 50. When you hit 100, you win a major prize. These days, you only have to leave a light on for about 2 seconds. Someone comes leaping out from behind a piece of furniture and turns it off. The place is enveloped in darkness. My dear old mother is almost 90. She has stopped visiting us. She was falling over. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it won't last, aren't you? Well, of course, you're right. But I'll tell you this. In 15 years, when my kids are discussing energy conservation, one of them will say, "You will never believe what our old man had us doing." And they'll laugh at it again. You know, recently I was on holiday, and my son was 15 then. And we get to a large lake, there's some people fishing. I'm not a fisherman. In fact, then I'd never fished, certainly never caught a fish. He said to me, "Dad, could we fish?" I said, "Son, we don't have a fishing rod," but he's a boy. So he went and got an old twig and a piece of rope, put a safety pin on the end and a big lump of bread. If any of you are anti-angling, let me reassure you, never in the history of the world have fish been so safe. They looked at the bread, they discussed the bread, they shared it out amongst their friends. And these people with their fancy fishing rods were laughing at Lloyd and I. And I'm very competitive. So after about 35 minutes, I said, "Wait here." I stalked across the road to a restaurant, outside of which I had earlier seen displayed whole fish. I bought one. Cost me almost £3. I went back and quickly stuck it on the hook and put it in the water. I said, "Lloyd, when some people come past, I want you to yell as loud as you can. Dad, I think you've got one." And he gave me a kind of sad look as if to say, "Oh, my parents." He said, "Okay, Dad, here come 5 or 6 people now," and I got ready. "Dad," he said, "I think you've got one." And I pulled it out of the water, they hear Lloyd's voice and they turned to look, and I turned to gloat, but they look embarrassed. Their heads are sunk and they walk away with their heads down. And I turned to Lloyd to ask what had gone wrong with my master plan. He is helpless with laughter, rolling in the grass. You don't often see a 15-year-old like that. It took me several minutes to get him talking again. "Okay," I said, "what's so funny?" "Oh, Dad," he said, 2 things. Number 1, he looked dead. You should have jiggled it a little. But Daddy said, best of all, you had put the hook through its tail. You know, fun rarely has to have a large price ticket attached to it. Fun is borrowing a tent and sleeping in it in the living room. It's going to the cinema once a year on a school night. Sometimes I would say to the children when Diane was out, "Let's go to the cinema." They say, "Dad, Mum will kill us." I'll say, "She'll never know." Fun is when you're in a traffic jam and the traffic's moving very closely, you say to the children, "The next car we pass on the inside lane will be driven by a man who will look exactly like the kind of man that Gemma is going to end up marrying." And as you get near, the kids look in and fall about laughing. And you try and keep a little composure. Now, there's something wrong with all of those. You can get pneumonia trying to sleep in tents. The man in the car may take your license number and look you up. We know it's foolish to go to the cinema on school nights, but it will probably be okay. And your children will laugh with you again. The time will come, surely, when you will cry with them. Every family goes through those times. It will be a tough time, and you'll have your arms around each other, as the family goes through some difficult time, but childhood needs to have those memories and times of helpless laughter. Sometimes in the media interviews I did for the book, The 60-Minute Father, a journalist would say to me, "What's your favorite part of the whole book?" I would answer in a heartbeat. It's the line that says, "When they were very young, you used to tickle them. Don't ever stop." Goal number 5, to defend the boundaries. You know, I was there when it happened. A father had bought a little kitten for his family, and he brought it home in a little wicker basket. But before he took the animal outside the relative safety of its environment, he explained the house rules with regard to this little animal to his 3 children. Emma, I think it was, she was about age 4. She was the youngest. He said, "You may cuddle this cat, and you may tickle its tummy. And once in a while you can just pick it up and hold it." But then his voice became very somber. But he said, "On no account must you ever pull this little cat's tail." Do you all understand that? 3 little heads nodded in agreement, including Emma's. The father, rather foolishly I thought, took the animal out of the little wicker cage and put the unfortunate beast on the floor. Whereupon little Emma, with 5 steps of those sturdy little legs, made her way towards him, grabbed the tail, turned, looked at her father, and pulled it for all she was worth. I was close enough to see this dear animal's eyes momentarily leave its head. You know what that little girl was saying? She was saying, "Dad, you have given me some boundaries. You could not have been clearer. I understand them. But I'm going to test you now. I want to know how important those boundaries are to you." It's practically a sacred moment. It will occur with every mum or dad, every single parent mum, every single parent dad, that time when that child will test you. At that moment, that little girl was looking for a reaction from her father. It is vital that she is not disappointed. This is not just a matter of discipline. This is not even just a matter of training. This is a matter of security. There is nothing more destined to breed insecurity in a child than for him or her to believe there are no boundaries, or even if there are, nobody cares if he or she crosses them. But part of being a parent is to give and to keep those boundaries. But there are some rules. Number 1, give them reasons why you want them to behave as you do. No good saying to a 15-year-old girl, "I want you to be pure. I don't want you to sleep around." They need to know why. See, they may reject your counsel, but if you give them reasons, years later, they can come back to your wisdom. Let them know why you want them to behave as you do. Secondly, choose your battles. You and I cannot fight every battle. Some of you have had 50 battles with your teens before you left today, haven't you? Some of you have got toddlers. I'm a lawyer, and property law is complicated. But have any of you ever heard the toddler's property law? Well, let me read it to you. This is the official list of toddler's property law. If I like it, it's mine. If it's in my hand, it's mine. If I can take it from you, it's mine. If I had it a little while ago, it's mine. If it's mine, it must never ever appear in any way to be yours. If I am doing or building something, all the pieces are mine. If it looks like mine, it's mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If you are playing with it and you put it down, it automatically becomes mine. If it's broken, it's yours. But you know, it's not just our toddlers, our teens. You know, I can remember Diane with Lloyd, not very long ago before he went to school. "Have you cleaned your teeth?" "Yes, Mum." "Let me smell." "Have you washed under your arms?" "Yes, Mum." She didn't offer to check that out. But you know, we cannot fight every battle. If you fight every battle, your children will think you're always on their back. You will bend them under the weight of criticism. Worse still, they'll never know when something really matters to you. I mean, say you go home from the seminar today, and you get home and your 15-year-old daughter comes home, she's had her ears pierced. You didn't want her to have her ears pierced. Now that may be a big battle to you. If so, fight it with all your heart. But make sure it is a big battle. Because if you scream at that girl, get out of my house, you will never have pierced ears while you live under my roof. Whatever will you do if something worse happens? Whatever will you do if that child comes home drunk? Whatever will you do if that child gets into drugs in some way? How can you say to your child, this matters to me, this is a big issue to me? You cannot fight every battle with the same intensity. And that means we have to let some go. And not only must we give them reasons, not only must we choose our battles, thirdly, we need to realize what Josh McDowell said is right. Rules without relationship lead to rebellion. Principle number 6, recognize the uniqueness of each child. You know, there's a fascinating verse tucked away in the Old Testament. It says this, bring up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. That verse is not a guarantee. There are no guarantees. That verse has to do with archery. In those old days, bows were made not of steel, but of wood. And if you wanted to hit the target, you had to aim the bow at the target, then allow for the bend that every piece of wood had. This verse says every child has a particular bend. You must find the key to each child's heart. How many of you have got more than one child? Stick your hands up. Now, are they like chalk and cheese? Yeah, aren't they just? You'll especially find that if you have a compliant child first, followed by a non-compliant child. Any of you got that? I can see it in your faces. The compliant child would say things like this to you, Daddy, could we have the television a little lower? I'm trying to do my homework. Did you get me that extra copy of Encyclopedia Britannica? Are you sure the museums close at 5? The second one is a little different. And you know, we will fail if we try to motivate them, to discipline them in the same way. These children are so different. I remember when Katie was 5 years old, I wanted her to read. I said, Katie, there's a book for you, darling. As soon as you finish reading that book, I'm going to buy you another one. Oh, thank you, Daddy. Katie read her way through scores of books. So now Lloyd hits 5. Lloyd, as soon as you finish reading that book, I'm going to buy you another one. Oh, no. Oh. You mean there are more than one of these things? Why would you do that? If I finish one, why'd you buy me another one? For years, I tried to motivate that little boy in exactly the same way as Katie, but I failed. Each is unique. And I'm a fool if I say to one of those, unless you buck up your ideas, you'll never be like your brother, you'll never be like your sister. Sometimes parents drive wedges between their children, those children never recover from, even in adulthood. Each is unique. And beware, there are some surprises in store for us. That non-compliant child can change, and that compliant one can as well. Don't take him or her for granted. Each is unique. Principle number 7, set yourself free of what other people think. You know, most of the goals that we're talking about were in my little book, The 60-Minute Father, but this one isn't. This one has dawned on me with such intensity since I wrote that book. Set yourself free of what other people think. The task of parenting is tough enough, isn't it? Without always looking over our shoulder, wondering what other people are making of our parenthood. Somebody said to me a couple of years ago, Rob, wouldn't it be ironic with you and Diane involved in kind of parental seminars if your own kids went off the rails? It wouldn't be ironic at all. They're doing fine at the moment, but there are no guarantees. And I will not live my life looking over my shoulder, wondering what other people are making of my parenthood. I won't do it. So often the parents of teenagers feel such failures. And I won't ask you to put your hands up, but many in this auditorium feel like that tonight. How did we go so wrong? We did exactly the same with this one as we did with that other one, but these teens are breaking your heart. They are sullen. They don't communicate with you. They're giving you a hard time. You're getting phone calls from school. Perhaps you've even have to pull them out of a police station or two. They are breaking your heart. Time and time again, I get letters from the parents of teenagers. I want you to know tonight, you are not alone. See, so often isolation breaks families. You are not alone. In fact, not long ago, I was interviewing Dr. James Dobson, one of the foremost authorities on the family in the world. I said, Dr. Dobson, say something now to the parent of teenagers who feels a failure. Never forget what he said. He's a consultant psychologist. He said, I believe when children hit 12 or 13, hormonal changes occur in their body which cause them to blast into outer space. They stop communicating. You think you've lost them forever. My advice to the parents of teenagers is just hang in there. Fight as few battles as you possibly can. Just get them through those teenage years. You will find when they're about 20, 21, you'll begin getting signals from out there. They're still alive. And most of them land again. You know, teenagers are unusual creatures, aren't they? Problem is they sneak up on us, don't they? Whatever happened to that little boy used to hold your hand when you went shopping? You remember him? Now he won't go out with you unless you've got a brown paper bag over your head. What happened to that little girl who used to pour out the contents of her day to you? Now, if you're lucky, you get a grunt. Those are very usual things. We say, I can't handle the pressure of it. We must remember they are under pressure too. People say to me, school days are the best days of your life. They weren't the best days of my life. There's peer pressure. You try to please your parents and your friends. There's bullying. There's just incredible conflict going on in our very beings. The tension of wanting to be accepted by my friends and please my parents. Whole bunch of issues going on. I'm straddled between childhood and adulthood. I remember one 17-year-old girl saying to me a couple of years ago, she said, legally, I could now get married, drive a motor car, have sex. She said, in truth, I don't feel ready for any of them. But a whole media from the time that child was about 12 years old has been saying, you're grown up now, live a little. It's tough for our teenagers as well. Don't look over your shoulder. Come to the seminars, read the books, but ultimately, you give this task of parenting your best shot. Principle number 8, don't delegate the big issues. Nobody summed it up for me like James Dobson. I had a tear in my eye when I listened to him speak about it. He said when he was a teenager, he walked down a corridor with his friends. Pretty well his values and the values of his friends and the values of the media, society as a whole, were very similar. He said either side of the corridor were doors, and on the doors were written things like excessive alcohol, gambling, promiscuous lifestyle, drug abuse, but all the doors were locked. He said occasionally you hear about one of your friends who'd gone behind one of the doors, but it was a big deal. He said today's teenager walks down that corridor and all the doors are open. And their friends are in the room, they're saying, we're having a blast in here. What are you doing out there? He said it's harder for today's teens. And for that reason, as parents, lone parents, single parent, mom or dad, if you have something you believe is right or wrong, you tell your children. If you believe there's a God in heaven, you share that faith with them. If you have a sexual ethic you want them to believe, you share it with them. It's why in Care for the Family, we have put hundreds of thousands of pounds behind resources to help parents talk to their teenagers about sex. They deserve to hear it from you. Here's a real letter from a real teenager. Dear Mum and Dad, there have been times you say you understand me, but you really don't. There are moments when I tell you about my problems in the hope of your advice or support, but quite often you shrug me off. You say that's nothing. You should have our troubles. But it was your responsibility to tell me about sex before I discovered it the wrong way. You may not know it, but I learned sex from the street. Believe me, it wasn't a good place to learn it. Principle number 9, hang in there. Don't ever give up. You know, ladies and gentlemen, you and I are in this task of parenting for the long haul. Some years ago, into my legal practice came an old woman. She was about 95 years old. She said to me, "I can rest in peace now, my son." I said, "Oh, I'm glad about that. Why?" She said, "I've just got my youngest boy into an old people's home." He was about 72 and a bit shaky. She wasn't in one. Anybody here with children in their 30s or 40s? Yes. Do you worry about them as much now as ever? More. Isn't that amazing? Folks, that's the bad news. But you and I are going for the long haul. As I said before, there are some surprises in store for us both ways. That non-compliant child can change, and don't take the compliant one for granted. And don't ever give up. Ruth Graham has written a lovely book called Prodigals and Those Who Love Them. Don't worry if these children move from parent to parent, sometimes even play one off against another. Don't worry if they find somebody outside the family they share their heart with, perhaps a youth club leader. That's a healthy thing. But remember, so often you will have to give them time. Now, we hear a lot today about the idea of quality against quantity time. We say, I can't give my kids much time, so I give them quality time. Well, that may be enough in some circumstances, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes you have to put in quite a lot of quantity to get the quality. Sometimes a mum or dad has to spend 5 or 6 hours around a Monopoly board with a teenage girl, and at the end she'll say, "Dad, as you're putting the pieces away, can I talk to you about something?" It's not always possible. Some of you will be separated from your children because of family breakup. But in any event, the heart of it is to let them know they are somebody. They matter to us. You know, I have confessed some of my failures to you. Let me tell you about one of my successes. It has been to date my daughter Katie since she was about 12 years old. Once a week we'd go for a cup of coffee or Coca-Cola together. Those were moments, sometimes in a kind of adult setting, where we would share our hearts with each other. Lloyd wasn't such a conversationalist. We had to find a place to drink coffee and play pool as well. But you fathers, let your daughters know how much you love them, won't you? Many young girls are getting into a promiscuous lifestyle because they are searching for their father's love. Met a dad the other day who said to me, "I can't tell my daughter I love her. I'm not emotional. Practice it in front of a mirror. But make sure you do it. Hang in there. Don't ever, ever give up." And what's the final goal? Well, to find the final goal, we go to a poem. And at the end of the 60-minute Father, I wrote a verse of this poem. The father is teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle. Some of you mums and dads have done that, I'm sure. She's about 5 or 6 years old. He has his hand on the back of the saddle. She doesn't know that sometimes he takes it away, then quickly puts it back before she can fall. But it's not very successful. And that night she is pushing her bicycle home and tears are running down her little face as her friends go whizzing past on their bicycles. But then the poet says this: "Tomorrow, though, I will run behind, arms out to catch her lest she fall. But suddenly she'll tilt, then balance wide of my reach till distance makes her small. And I will remember that to teach her, I had to follow. But when she learned, I had to let her go." It's the hardest of all the goals. We took my daughter to university a couple of months ago, and as we're coming home in the car, I said to Diane, "Don't you cry." That's because I didn't want two of us in tears. But we must let them go. And normally, if we let them go, we keep them. You know, the task of parenthood is not an easy one. Somebody has put it well: there is no pain like parental pain. With all our failures and the inability to be the kind of mums and dads we want to be, perhaps with the incredible difficulty of being a single parent mum or a single parent dad, with all our difficulties, we want to give this task our very best shot. It can be hard. but we also have the privilege, and dare I say it, sometimes the fun of molding a life. And that life we mold will almost certainly one day step into those same parental shoes. And there's the great challenge. To be an effective mum, an effective dad. To be an effective single parent, mum or dad, not just for the sake of our children, but for the sake of our children's children. And for all that, we need a little help. Some years ago, I was due to address an international law conference in Vienna. About 1,000 lawyers. I was very nervous. And I went into Lloyd's bedroom. He was very young. I said, "Son, I prayed many prayers for you, and I'm a bit scared about tomorrow. Would you pray for me?" I will never forget what that little boy prayed that day. I put a little prayer at the back of the book, The 60-Minute Father. This is how he prayed. "Dear Lord, please help my dad be very brave and not to make too many mistakes." It's not a bad prayer for every mother, for every father. Thank you so much for listening.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, you may be interested in Rob Parsons' bestseller The 60-Minute Father, available on book and audio cassette, published by Hodder and Stoughton. Sir John Harvey Jones said of The 60-Minute Father, "It will help you achieve the most important success of all." And Fiona Castle said, "It's a book for fathers that every mother will want to read." There's a companion video in this series, The 60-Minute Marriage. Linda Lee Potter said of the book The 60-Minute Marriage, "It's wise and witty, full of down-to-earth advice that works. So whether you have a great marriage, are going through difficult times, or even just thinking of getting married, don't miss this incredible film." All these resources are available from local bookshops or direct from Care for the Family, P.O. Box 488, Cardiff, CF1 1RE, telephone number 01222 464 003.